Good afternoon and welcome to this panel on how transport improvements in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough will drive national growth. And my goodness, what a panel we have. I'm slightly nervous about how I'm going to manage my time, but don't worry about that. Well, that's my job. So thank you all so much for joining this panel, and we're really looking forward to hearing from all of you on your vision and expectations of transport improvements in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. I'm Naomi Green. I'm the Managing Director of England's Economic Heartland, which is the sub-national transport body that covers the Oxford to Cambridge growth corridor and works incredibly closely with Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority as one of our key partners. And if you look at the geography that we cover as a kind of broader sub-national transport body, the strategic positioning of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, both geographically and economically, is phenomenal. For those who travel through Peterborough Station, you will see the proud statements of it being the gateway to the east. And actually, it's a very good point that is such a significant railway station connecting into the wider east, and of course a key part of those north-south links across the country as well. Economically, I'm sure you've heard throughout the last day and a half about the very significant economic opportunity that exists within the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough area, and as part of that, both transport and wider infrastructure are absolutely fundamental to realising that economic opportunity, not just for the region, but actually for the UK as a whole. As a subnational transport body, we focus on strategic projects, and there are some really key projects that are essential to unlocking the opportunity and potential of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. The ones that come to mind first always for me are Ely and Hawley junctions. Those who've been working with us for a long time will know a lot about them. That project, when invested, will take 100,000 lorries off the road a year. That is significant. More than that, it will reduce congestion time by 5.6 million hours. It's got a BCR of 4.89, cost-benefit ratio sorry about the acronym, 4.89 to 1. That's for every pound the government spends, it returns £4.89 back into the UK economy. It just feels like a complete no regrets investment, but we're not there yet. We've got to keep pushing for that project. East-West Rail, we look forward to hearing about it later. Really significant for unlocking east-west connectivity across the Oxford to Cambridge region. And then, of course, my goodness, incredible local connectivity, opening the door for people who live and work across the region. And then, in addition to that, those really significant road improvements along the A10, supporting the A14 junctions. And we will hear about further those, the A1, the A47, throughout this session. So, before we go further, I'm delighted to introduce our panel. I'm going to introduce each individual panel member and ask them to spend a couple of minutes on their reflections before we open up to a conversation. So first of all, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Paul Bristow, the Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, to the panel. You need no further introduction, so I will hand over to you to hear your vision and expectations of all of us for delivering transport improvements in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Thank you, Paul.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. I think this session's already been very useful because I was able to share some memories with my two colleagues on my left and right about nights out on Fifth Avenue in Peterborough when Peterborough nightlife was awesome. But it's coming back. So where do I start? I mean, I think the first thing is when I remember being sat in a pub in Peterborough one day, and the idea about me standing for mayor came about, and we were talking about what do I want my strapline, what do I want my vision to be, how do I get people excited from Sawston all the way down in South Cambridgeshire to up to Peterborough to Wisbech and everywhere in between. And the strapline that Peter and I came up with, and Peter's my chief of staff, was get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough moving. Was to get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough moving. Because if you think every opportunity that we have in terms of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, that would only be enhanced, that would only be made better by improved connectivity. And not just improved connectivity to get from Cambridge to London or from Peterborough to London, to get connectivity within our county. And if we do this, we get that right. If we get that right, then there's no limit to how Peterborough and Cambridgeshire can continue to contribute to the economic growth of this country. So what does that look like? So first and foremost, we talked about dualling some of our A roads. We've talked about that. We talked about the A47, the A10. I think the cases for dualling those roads are almost undeniable. They're already on the government's kind of radar. It's about making the case and selling that. It's also the same for the A141, about making improvements there. And it's not a bad thing that people choose to use their cars to go from one part of our county to the other. It's still the mode of transport that people want to use, decide to use, and vote with their feet. And until we come up with decent public transport alternatives, we shouldn't be thinking people are wicked or somehow inherently wrong for wanting to get from A to B using private cars. The second challenge is, and this is in terms of something I want from the CSR, it's priority number 1, 2, and 3. We've talked about it. It's this Ely and Hawley junction. Now, I want to connect our 3 cities and our market towns with much faster trains, and there's a huge opportunity to do that with new mayoral powers over rail devolution. The number 1 travel to work area into Cambridge is Kings Lynn. And when someone pointed that out to me, said, "Well, why are people travelling from Kings Lynn to Cambridge?" These are the people you never see. These are the people who actually make Cambridge work. They are people who work in our service industries, in our hospitality, and they're using so much of their disposable income to travel from where they live in Kings Lynn to work in Cambridge. And we can do so much better if we wanted to connect Peterborough, Ely, our market towns of the Fenland to Cambridge. It takes 45 minutes for me to get from Peterborough to London by train. It takes a similar amount of time to get from Cambridge to London by train. It takes me 55 minutes to get from Peterborough to Cambridge by train. And heaven knows you want to get back after 8 o'clock at night. Oh, goodness me. You're asking something really, really difficult there. Heavens knows someone might want to go for a meal or have a pint after work in Cambridge. I mean, goodness me. So, we can and will do so much better if we just had that junction. Do you know something? I don't think we've been waiting that long, have we? 21 years? 21 years? I mean, goodness me. I mean, lots of things have come and done in the 21 years since we've been starting that case. And so it's unarguable. So it's number 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the asks we have in the CSR. But it's also having a little bit of vision and a bit of thought about how we ensure Cambridge remains as special as it is. If we want to double the size of Cambridge over the next kind of few years, we've got to think very much more, think about how we're going to get people in and out of Cambridge. It's already congested. And we've got to pick something which is going to be quick, reliable, and cheap. And we've not invented matter transportation yet. But we have invented light rail. Light rail is something that works in similar sized cities on the continent. It's worked in many other cities in the UK, and it's something we can deliver. And it's ensuring that Cambridge remains this really significant, special place, because it can disappear far easier than it was to create. And if we want to ensure and we want to deliver that growth that the government has, and lobbying 101, by the way, and I say this as a Conservative mayor, someone who used to be a lobbyist to work in PR, lobbying 101 is to show how the government can achieve their own objectives by doing what you want them to do. So that's what we're going to do when it comes to light rail. And if we get that solution, Cambridge can become as special as it is. So they're the 3 things that I talked about inherently in the campaign. There's plenty more things we can do around active travel, plenty more things we can do about buses, plenty more things we can do about Peterborough Station, plenty more things about unlocking that potential of the north of our county and making sure that the ripples and the enhancement of Cambridgeshire is going. Cambridgeshire and Peterborough is a special place. It's one of the few areas that contributes to our national economy. But we could be doing so much better. And our vision, without wanting to coin a phrase, is to make generally Cambridgeshire and Peterborough the best place in the country to live. And we can do it with your partnership, your investment, and making sure that investing in transport contributes significantly to this country's economy. So let's go out and let's do it.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I think there is a lot in there for us to reflect on and certainly think about how, as partners, we can all work together to do that. That's absolutely critical. Talking of partners, I am going to hand over to Andrew Summers, who is the Chief Executive of Transport East, the neighbouring subnational transport body to the east of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Andrew, in a similar way to me, looks at the big strategic transport connectivity, and our intention is that we work across boundaries so that no one feels there's a boundary between the two places. It's got to be seamless, because to be honest, where people travel is irrelevant compared to what the geography that we work on. So Andrew, over to you as my seamless other half.
Thank you very much, Naomi, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrew Summers. I'm Chief Executive of Transport East. We're the subnational transport body for Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Southend and Thurrock. But more fundamentally, we're a partnership that delivers a shared vision. And so just unpicking that, because those two words have already come up and they're going to be key to the discussion this afternoon. We're a partnership of both the public and private sector. So all of our local authorities, 29 of them, are part of our body. We have the Chambers of Commerce and the Business Board, as well as the DFT, National Highways and Network Rail. So it really is a cross-sector, cross-party group of people that have come together around a shared vision. We have an independent chair, Will Quince, former MP, former minister, who is driving our work forward with a board of locally elected members from across our authorities. So very much an emphasis on partnership. And with regards to today, we have an incredibly strong partnership with the CPCA and England's Economic Heartland, and I think we feel we have to work together because there's a real prize there. And that's where it comes to the vision. Many of you may have seen the ILGA, or now Local Government East, document last year, Opportunity East, which we, EH, the CPCA and others all collectively developed, which set out the economic opportunity that is in the east of England. And it sets out a really compelling narrative for government. Firstly, we're going to power the UK by 2035. 90% of homes in the UK will be powered by electricity generated in our region. We're going to feed the UK, so a third of all Grade 1 arable farmland is in our region. Not only that, the food of the future is developed here, for example, in the agritech clusters in Norwich and Cambridge. And also we help trade with the world, and Steve will probably come on to this a bit later on, but over half of the UK's freight containers come through the ports on our coast, through the east, through the CPCA to places in the north and the Midlands. So we're fundamental for UK prosperity. Not only that, a net contributor to the Exchequer, and we have 9 really powerful growth sectors, including advanced manufacturing, logistics, that are growing in our region. So a really good opportunity for the UK to invest. But coming on to transport is one of the things that is going to enable that growth, enable that opportunity going forwards. And we've set out a clear strategy on how we want to deliver that. It's focused on connectivity, and in the context of this conversation today, particularly east-west connectivity from Norwich, from Ipswich, from Essex, through Cambridgeshire, through Peterborough, and onwards into the Midlands and the North. It's focused on energising our rural and coastal communities. So 1/3 of people in our region live in rural communities. There's a tremendous amount of transport-related social exclusion, and we need to tackle that as well. But not only that, we also have the layer in terms of our international gateways. So we have 13 ports up and down our coast. We have 3 international airports, including Stansted, which is incredibly important for the Cambridge, Cambridge and Peterborough, Cambridge, Norwich, Southend. We've got a number in our region, which are really important for our tourism and inward investment. So I'll talk a bit later on about some of the specific priorities, but I think there's a real need here to continue our partnership working with a clear collective vision. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And just thinking about those kind of broader connectivity and these really big strategic opportunities that we have, I'm delighted to introduce Steve Beel, Chief Executive of Freport East, one of 12 freeports across the UK, established by UK government. And Steve, we've worked incredibly closely with you on the enormous opportunity of improving rail connectivity from the eastern ports, and we look forward to hearing from you about your aspirations for Freport Eastern connectivity through Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
Thanks, Naomi. Afternoon, everyone. I come representing Freport East, but I was also born and raised in Wisbech, went to the local state school. There wasn't a reliable bus network to get to Fifth Avenue on a regular basis, so actually Mendy's in Wisbech was the nightclub of choice. Whether it still exists or not, I've no idea. But anyway,
my 18th birthday took place in Mendy's in Wisbech.
we'll continue the loving later. I think I can have. But so I genuinely have a real interest in what's going on in Cambridge and Peterborough from that perspective as well, because Wisbech in particular has particular needs that need to be addressed. But from a Freport East perspective, so as Naomi says, Felixstowe in particular, but also Harwich and Ipswich. I think part of coming into this conversation is to talk about, on the one hand, what Freport East and Felixstowe in particular offer to Cambridge and Peterborough is basically global connectivity. We have an increasing amount of kind of manufacturing activity. It's kind of 21st century manufacturing activity in around Cambridge and Peterborough, and it's kind of often not recognised what's actually going on. But obviously, what those businesses need and what that growth needs is connectivity to the outside world. So I think there's a key thing here about the kind of trade route looking east from Cambridge goes directly through Felixstowe, and that's how you get your products in and out of the rest of the world. So that's a kind of key part for us. We're actually working on a transport master plan with Transport East currently, which is kind of designed to kind of set out those kind of priority transport infrastructure schemes that are all about supporting Freport East growth. Now, we are based in Suffolk and Essex, but again, the east-west connectivity is absolutely critical. So whether it is freight or whether it is kind of passenger activities, that's a really important aspect for us. And a lot of the investors that we talk to, and we've got investors kind of building facilities as we speak, it is often talked about it's the combination of Felixstowe for their connectivity, Cambridge in its kind of knowledge economy, and Stansted that actually really appeal to international investors to move to our area. And I think that's Cambridge and Peterborough obviously important, but I think this is about the East of England opportunity, that links between those places are so critically important, and I think offer an enormous amount of opportunity for communities in those areas as well. So, and I guess part of the reason I'm doing my job at Freport East was because there are also communities on the coast of Essex, for example, that I identify with the challenges that we always faced in Wisbech. And I think it's this part of this story is about how we take the opportunities of growth for places like Cambridge, which is a world city, obviously, but how can it be that Wisbech, which is 30 miles away, cannot have access to those kind of opportunities in the same way. So I think there's kind of that linkage of how we kind of take big nodes of growth and make sure the transport connectivity is there to support local communities to access those opportunities is critically important.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was really, really helpful, and lots of things that we can draw out from that in terms of how we move from aspiration through to actually kind of realising real change on the ground. I hope this is okay to say, Natalie, but I think I also know that Natalie is a resident of Peterborough, and I'm not sure whether she spent a lot of time testing the nightclubs since she recently moved there. But I know that we've had a conversation about the quality of the Starbucks, so perhaps that's a sign of our maturity. I'm delighted to welcome Natalie to the stage and embarrass you on that point. Communication and Engagement Director for East West Rail. Natalie, I'll hand over to you. Any reflections on the nightclub experiences of Peterborough and East West Rail as a project?
Thank you very much, Naomi. So yeah, I do live in Peterborough. I have to confess, I didn't spend my teen years there, so I can't compare on the nightclubs of the late 90s.
Well, you're never too old.
I'm not going to deny that in previous years before having kids, we tried the nightlife in Peterborough, but we could improve, I think. So I'm Peterborough resident. And my role is at East West Rail. So East West Rail is a train line that's being developed to connect across the Oxford to Cambridge corridor. And it is all about connectivity. So east to west connectivity through transport, as everyone's been speaking about already, really, really important. The rail line will connect between the areas sort of Milton Keynes, Bedford, across to Cambridge and out the other side into Oxford. And why is that important? Well, as we've been speaking about, the importance of the area, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, in terms of the input to the national economy is huge. Already the region across the corridor accounts for about 70% of GDP. But it's constrained by the connectivity across the region. And what East West Rail is intending to do is help to connect that region. At the moment, the impact of that 7% on GDP is just over £40 billion to the UK economy. by maximising the full potential of that region, which includes the full length route of East West Rail. The Public First report released earlier this year looks at that being around £78 billion. So that's a massive increase in productivity and impact from the region. But there's also the piece that really matters to the communities who are already there. Paul, I know you were speaking yesterday about growth is important, but you really need to think about how it benefits the people that are already living there. And I think one of the things that East West Rail will do is better connect the communities at that local level to enable people to have the opportunity for their kids and their grandkids to be able to have homes that they can afford, jobs that they can aspire to without having to move out of the region. So the connectivity of East West Rail will enable people, families, people who've got kids. Naomi, I know you referenced yesterday around wanting the opportunity for your daughter to have the access to those jobs in future without having to look at moving away to what are traditionally seen as the sort of big economic regions in the UK. I want the same for my kids. Might think differently in a few years when they turn into teenagers, but we'll see. So East West Rail is really focused on those community levels, talking to people, engaging at that understanding of how can we better improve the connectivity in their region by understanding what matters to them. And that's not only in having stations that have the capacity to cope with sort of modern living across that region, but also looking at how we can further improve sustainable travel. So it's looking at the first mile, last mile of that connectivity, not just the stations and the rail line itself, to make sure that we're investing not only in what we need for right now, but also providing a platform that enables further growth and further opportunities for those people in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Natalie. And I'm sure there are lots of reflections and questions to come on that, particularly how we can help as many people as possible benefit from the investment. Last but certainly no means least, because he's the money man, I'm delighted to introduce Dan Mansfield, Director of Transport, Local Advisory, a Local Authority Advisory and Lending at the National Wealth Fund. Dan, really welcome to the stage. How are you going to solve all of this for us?
Well, maybe come to that, but unfortunately, I'll obviously kind of fess up straight away. I've got no kind of real previous history with Cambridge and Peterborough, I'm afraid. So no stories of nights out. However, a week on Sunday, I am swimming in Grafham water and then cycling and running around the area. So any tips on good places to get some refreshment afterwards, very, very, very much welcomed. So whether that counts as active travel or not, I'm not sure. So yeah, National Wealth Fund. We've been established by government to assist with delivering the growth mission. And recently the Chancellor gave an updated steer on what the government wants us to focus on. So 4 key areas: clean energy, advanced manufacturing, digital and tech, and transport. So kind of we've got a kind of key role to play in helping the combined authorities, regional economies deliver their investment plans to help deliver the industrial strategy through investment, and particularly my focus is on transport. Having said that, I haven't kind of that much experience of the area. I did attend a session of kind of the combined authorities put on at Cambridge North, probably in March time, I think it was. It took me 4 trains to get there from Leeds, where I'm based. However, what I did notice was it's a brand new station, and I think so did a bit of looking up about it, find out a bit more about it. So it was built in 2017. It cost £50 million. I think first year of operation there was about 320,000 passengers used it. Last year it was something north of 1.3 million. And whilst that's less than maybe the original forecasts for what the patronage usage of that station was, it's probably one of the few stations across the country that's got higher levels of patronage now than it did pre-COVID. What's good about it, just for me as a kind of coming in from a transport perspective, one of the key things we've talked about so far is some of the big projects, East West Rail, we've got, Ely Junction. That's going to free capacity up that will mean more people can get to places like Cambridge North or Cambridge South or other parts of the area. You've then got to get the people from those stations to the places that they need to go for jobs, work, and where and kind of where they live. how do you do that? Well, Cambridge North's got 1,000 bike parking spaces. It's got a bus rapid transit system that links to the Scion Park, that links up to the rest of the city. So connecting up these, hubs via, kind of the spokes of service, be that active travel, be that through kind of bus reform and ensuring that the buses get people to the stations at the right sort of time, I think is really, really important. So I guess kind of one of my observations, been as a non-resident or limited experience, would be kind of, you've got some great projects, but we can't forget about how we make sure that those are linked up with with the rest, to serve the needs of the people, businesses, and residents.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And I will say there are some fantastic pubs around Huntingdon. And the leader of Huntingdonshire is actually here if you wish to get the true advice. That aside, we will now move back to transport. There is a lot to do, a lot of opportunities and a lot of aspiration. Mayor, I'm going to come to you first and say, how can we as partners, what do we need to do, both partners on the panel, but partners in the region, in the audience as well, to actually move these projects forward? What do you need to see? And as part of that, what is it that government needs to do to help as well, to give the certainty that these projects will deliver? And I'm particularly thinking about the fact that there is an unended opportunity for private sector investment in a region like Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. But it's like the Holy Grail. How do we actually make it happen? Because I think it's the conditions around it that are really, really critical. So I think some reflections on that would be really helpful.
So speaking to someone who's come into Cambridgeshire politics from the outside, I mean, I was the MP for Peterborough, but I've never been a councillor in Cambridgeshire. And some of the things that I look at, where I think we've perhaps let ourselves down, is not we've never really spoken with one voice before, and we need to change that. So my attitude is, in terms of the CPCA, we've got a board. Okay, they're no longer going to be my board; they are my partners for delivery, and we're going to try and speak where we can with one voice, and we're going to focus on what unites us rather than what divides us. And I think first and foremost, what is that? So in terms of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, we need to, as I said earlier, focus on enhancing Cambridge as a place that benefits the UK economy, what makes Cambridge special. We need to enhance and protect that through growth. And I like the point that was made earlier. Growth is only effective if it actually suits those people who already live in Cambridgeshire. Only if it doesn't benefit my friend who lives in a one-bedroom home with 3 kids in East Chesterton, then why are we doing it? Okay, so it's got to work for the existing population in Cambridge, but at the same time we've got to make sure that growth is obviously economically attractive, continues to grow Cambridge, but that spreads and ripples out to Huntingdonshire, to the Fens, to Peterborough, to places like Wisbech. I can't remember which gentleman said Wisbech, earlier on. So who disagrees with that vision? No one disagrees with that vision. And that's something that all, I think, politicians and all private sector delivery partners and public sector delivery partners can unite around. So if that is our vision, that is our focus, we can do that. And then becomes the conversation about how do we get there, okay? And so I always take this view, sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always certain. And I know as private sector investors, certainty is what you need. And quite often, sometimes we've let ourselves down by not having that certainty, by changing our mind, changing direction. We start a new page. My board and my delivery partners, we're going to unite around some key projects, and we're going to go and hunt as a pack and sell Cambridgeshire and Peterborough to everyone who needs it selling to. I mean, well, I think Cambridgeshire and Peterborough uniquely, sells itself. I think it sells itself as an area, and I completely agree with the idea about locking into the east of England as well, and the opportunities there. But we need to speak with one voice, and we need to go out there and hunt as a pack together. And that's the certainty I hope that private sector partners will also value.
Fantastic, thank you. Andrew, any reflections? And if you want to focus on a specific project as well, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I'm going to continue Paul's theme of certainty, because when our board met in advance of our spending review submission to the Chancellor and the Secretary of State for Transport back in February, the need to achieve certainty was fundamental to their thinking. And in our submission to the Chancellor, we set out 5 fiscal changes that would consolidate our offer. And we know in the East that our local authorities will deliver when given the opportunity. We've seen in Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex examples of that, in Great Yarmouth and Lowestoft with the 2 new bridges. When the government gave bus funding to Norfolk, there was a 16% uplift in patronage. So we know that we can deliver. And there were 5 things that our board set out that we'd like to see. Long-term certainty of funding and an integrated settlement going forwards. It allows the private sector to have the confidence then to invest. In my previous role at Transport for London, I helped them set up their Healthy Streets portfolio, and it did just that. It was a long-term investment portfolio. It allowed us to over-program, start more schemes in the knowledge that some of them wouldn't continue, but you still had a long pipeline going and a 5-year, 10-year investment programme. It provides that confidence. There are 4 other things that we asked for as well. So equity of funding with other parts of England. We've seen over the last few years the Midlands and the North get additional funding streams. We need to have those in the East as well. It's only fair. We're a net contributor to the Exchequer. We also need to boost local authority capacity and capability to deliver some of these schemes. A number of our local authorities have said, look, we get this one-off grant funding, but we don't have the capacity in-house to then be able to deliver schemes through that. We need to boost the capacity and capability within those local authorities because they can do it. We also want to reduce the risk to local authorities in terms of developing schemes, developing that pipeline. A lot of our partners have said they don't want to take that financial risk increasingly because it's too expensive to do so, and it's holding back the pipeline of investment that we have going forwards. And I guess uniquely for our region, the lowest lying region in the UK, both across the Fens in CPCA and across into Norfolk and Suffolk, we want to have an extra boost on maintenance and climate change adaptation. We know that if our transport network breaks down, the economy is going to suffer significantly. We're starting to see this, for example, with the Orwell Bridge in Suffolk. When that breaks down, it really does block up the whole transport network for miles around. So we want that focus on maintenance going forward. So 5 asks that we've had, and they're not rocket science. The Treasury could do these working with us to allow us to have that long-term view. And I guess the final point there, devolution coming in Norfolk, Suffolk and Greater Essex would allow those mayors to really take control of that going forwards, working with Paul and others to make sure that we really have that long-term certain view.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And Steve, just coming back to the question, I'm going to come along the panel and then I'm going to come out to the audience. So please do think of your questions because it's important that we hear from you as much as anything. Just coming back to that key point, Steve, about delivery and how we can kind of retain certainty that these projects are going to deliver. What is it that you think we need to focus on, either from a specific project, I think I might know the answer, but also how do we just get these things delivered? Like, what is it that we need to do better?
Well, I think as Paul talked about, I think being able to talk with one voice and just be really clear about the asks is key. I mean, to be honest, on Ely Hawley Junction, that has been the case. I mean, I've been in my job for 2.5 years, and I think it's been pretty consistent throughout that period that not just across East Anglia, but actually the rest of the country, there's been a really clear narrative around the importance of it. Which I guess demonstrates it only gets us so far with the Treasury, but it's almost a prerequisite that has to be in place. And I think actually on Ely Hawley as well, I think coming from our experience with the private sector as well, it's also about kind of positioning it as, the argument we've made is that Ely Hawley, in a sense, ironically, is not really for the people of Ely and Hawley, but it is actually about connecting the entirety of the UK to global markets. And you kind of have to view it in the context of it's a corridor that extends for thousands of miles, and it's ended up being this kind of one constraint on the freight flows. And so you've actually already had, shipping lines, ports, railway operators, freight operators investing actually hundreds of millions of pounds in making that corridor more effective. And this is the kind of bit that needs to kind of catch up. I guess, but beyond that, I think like Andrew, I think devolution is a real opportunity. Cambridge and Peterborough obviously already are kind of a few steps down the road on that. But I think with, particularly from where we're based, obviously with Essex and then Norfolk, Suffolk, I think between then there's 3 powerful mayors with new powers and an ability to kind of push things forwards, I think is a really important opportunity. I think where we kind of need to, I think, collectively think more is that everything has become so centralised in funding terms that no matter what scheme you talk about these days, it's all always about, we're waiting for the Treasury to make a decision, we're waiting for the next spending review. And that is sclerotic, right? It just stifles, chokes the entire economy. I think with whatever funding streams come through on devolution and also kind of the opportunity to think, I was going to say take back control, but that's probably the wrong phraseology. But I think just to have a bit more control, I think to work out which of those schemes in our region we can find other ways of getting funded, basically. I think because even if the Treasury were a bit quicker, we know that there's only a limited pot, and actually, if we're arguing for money from the North in practice, then I've just been listening to Andy Burnham make the exact opposite case, right? So I think where we can, we have to be able to identify those schemes where we can identify other revenue streams. With the best will in the world, Dan unfortunately doesn't provide grants. He provides finance, and the only way you can get finance into a transport project is by identifying some income streams that Dan can then lend against, right? So I think I'm not sure which schemes that applies to in Cambridge and Peterborough any more than the rest of the east of England, but I do think that's an important part of where we need to go in that direction of working out what those possibilities are.
Yeah, and I think that is an absolutely fantastic point, and one that, again, going back to what the Mayor said about everyone working together, if we keep focused on that together, it is surely a lot easier to get to those end game outcomes. I'm going to come to you last, Natalie, because I want to ask you about maximising the benefits of investment. But just coming on to you, Dan, any response or reflection, particularly to Steve's comments?
No, I mean, I think Steve's spot on. Kind of for lots of transport projects, if you go to the Department for Transport, there will be some grant funding available for some of those schemes, or there'll be you have to get them into the Network Rail enhancements pipeline, and that's kind of a cyclical process. We've talked a bit about pipelines earlier on, but I kind of most of these projects, or even things like city region sustainable transport settlements, which I know the authority doesn't get, but other kind of combined authorities do. There's got to be a local contribution. That local contribution has got to be kind of funded from somewhere. And kind of as Steve says, for those sort of projects, you need to think of innovative ways of of doing these things. So things like will often be posited about land value capture and using kind of the value of property and development to kind of deliver that. That's fine, but that comes somewhere down the line. If you're going to kind of leverage that from house builders who are going to be building X number of houses over X number of years, some of those receipts are not going to come in for kind of 10, 20 years maybe. So who finances that? And we talk a lot about private finance, but I think a lot of the time what we actually mean is private funding. And it's kind of like it's more difficult for a bank or a private financial institution to look at something that could be very variable income streams over a period of time to repay an upfront investment. And kind of part of what the wealth fund's there to do is we can either work with local authorities and lend to them, and we lend to them at a kind of a pretty advantageous rate. It's lower than the rate that they can borrow from the Public Works Loan Board, which is kind of I guess the default way that local authorities finance their capital programs. Or we can work with the private sector organisations and deploy a number of financial products that kind of help maybe de-risk projects a little bit. So, we've got the mandate from government to maybe take a little bit more risk in those projects that might be just, the thing that nudges them over the edge into a viable project when it's actually, kind of maybe a little bit, on the borders. So, yeah, there's very much kind of focus on the different types of funding streams that are available, and we've got to be think and be clever about what they might be, and kind of happy to talk more about those in questions.
Fantastic, thank you very much, Dan. And is your engagement always via a local authority, or are you happy to talk to developers specifically as long as they're sort of supported by the local authority?
So we do work directly with the local authorities, but if there's people out there who've got a project that wants financing that's within our mandate, then we can lend to private sector organisations. We can invest in private sector organisations. just as an example of one of the organisations from the area that we have invested in, we provided an equity investment into Pragmatic, which is a semiconductor manufacturer that's based in Cambridgeshire. They actually established a manufacturing facility up in County Durham, but we kind of provided finance for that organisation. And, you know, kind of as long as it sits within clean energy, advanced manufacturing, digital and tech or transport, we can work with people who have got projects in those sectors.
Fantastic. That's really helpful to understand. And then last but not least, Natalie, we obviously with East West Rail have a very strong level of certainty it's proceeding. Well, it is proceeding, but actually there's a responsibility on all of us to make the most of that investment and extend it as far as possible. How do you actually do that? What are you actually doing to kind of enable that? And I think some of this comes back to some of the work that Cambridgeshire and Peterborough are doing around kind of light rail and connecting into it and all that sort of stuff. But from your perspective, East West Rail, how are you thinking about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the key things that we're looking at to make sure that we can maximise that opportunity and maximise it early is that point that, you know, other panel members have spoken about around consistency and certainty. That helps us to engage with the communities along the route. And I think, you know, looking at infrastructure projects, these aren't quick turnaround projects. It takes a long time to deliver major infrastructure. It's complex. But what we can do is look at where we can provide opportunities before the full scheme is available and online. And that takes multiple routes, whether that's through skills and employment, whether that's through the supply chain, whether that's through the social value that we can offer that's more than the railway in itself. It's around that connectivity between communities and the meaningful impact that we can deliver as we work with those communities ahead of and alongside the construction phase of that project, so that we can look to really maximise that investment early through things beyond just getting on a train and going from A to B. And that takes multiple different routes, and that's, you know, active travel, all of the local opportunity plans that surround these areas, and also from an environmental and biodiversity perspective, what can we do that improves the area that we're working in, to make sure that we're leaving a positive legacy that goes beyond just travel from A to B. It's that bigger picture and that better thing that's left behind for the communities.
Absolutely, and of course, East West Rail. I think it's worth saying East West Rail won't just stop at Cambridge. The idea is that it goes beyond Cambridge, out into Norfolk and Suffolk, and securing Cambridge East as an investment is an absolutely critical part of the continuation of that rail route beyond Cambridge to service those core areas that are a key part of the Cambridgeshire economy. I don't know whether you want to add anything, Andrew, while I open it to the audience on that particular point.
No, I just think to say we've worked closely with our partners in Norfolk, in Suffolk and Essex to show the real economic benefits. In the next few weeks, we're going to launch a study that we've published on the significant opportunities of, I guess, the fusion of the economies of Cambridgeshire and going further east. So, for example, the event that we had in Cambridge North a few months ago that prefaced this, University of Cambridge were talking about the agritech sector in Norwich, and actually connectivity between Norwich and Cambridge is absolutely fundamental in order to grow that very unique corridor, and along that therefore supports places like Heathrow Engineering, which are growing, but the connectivity is absolutely fundamental to improve that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Andrew. So can I come out to the floor? Any questions? Oh, look at this. It's exciting. I'm going to, just for the gentleman at the back actually had his hand up first. Yeah, with the glasses. Thank you.
Hello, panel. I guess I'm following up on one of the things that Paul mentioned. My main business has been in Peterborough for most of my career. So, but I'm involved in a new garden village in Huntingdon with 4,500 homes and a major commercial and energy park. I also have some interest in Cambridge, where I've been working on some medical research on stroke, and I invested in delivering a solution for strokes. So I'm best placed now to talk about the disconnect between the three areas previous, and I think Paul's suggestion about integrating them is unbelievably useful, because when I am in Cambridge, I get all of the local businesses say to me, well, when are you going to deliver these housing in Huntingdon? Because we can't afford to buy houses in Cambridge, but a lot of people commute from Huntingdon to Cambridge. And therefore, fantastic, that would be brilliant, because that's our biggest issue that we've got in businesses in Cambridge. So I listen to that and think, well, that's right. Well, I'm involved in Huntingdon. I'm trying to get houses there. People in Cambridge want it, because I'm talking to them every week when I go there, and they ask me when I'm going to be delivering these houses, and I tell them it's a long process. I then talk to the university in Peterborough, because I need the skill sets from the university to go into the renewable energy and the sustainability that I want to create within the garden village. So the integration of Peterborough is massive with the university, because we need to keep the skills. So what I'm really trying to say, Paul, is the absolute correlation. Now that I'm kind of in the middle of all three, I realise that your vision is unbelievably important, because prior to, there was a disconnect between Peterborough, Huntingdon and Cambridge. I don't mean that in any nasty way, it's just that everyone's so busy. The connectivity and the collaboration that can be gained by those three working together, because they've all got massive skill sets in different areas, that brought together, the sum of the parts can be absolutely more massive than the individual, but it needs to be tapped and made to happen. So I'm just putting a plug for what you've said, and how important that would be for someone like me who's got working knowledge in all three, and how great it would be if they could be brought together and integrate for the reasons I've just mentioned.
Well, what an advert for my ideas. I mean, that's great. I couldn't have put it better myself. Well, thanks, Carl. Look, you've nailed it, in the sense that I think in the past, when we talk about Cambridgeshire, it's been a difficult concept for some people to grasp. You know, a lot of people from Peterborough, South Lincolnshire, East Northamptonshire, quite often looks towards Peterborough. In Cambridge, there are communities obviously in Suffolk, in Essex, in Hertfordshire that surround Cambridge, and lots of people kind of look there. But if we can just connect our county, and that's not wrong, by the way, because county lines are sometimes artificial. We're going to make sure that we that those connections are strong as well. People do live in Bedfordshire, Essex, Suffolk and Hertfordshire, and I do get that. But if we're able to connect our county and create that sort of identity, when I talk connect as well, I talk about transport connections. That's what we're here to talk about. It's obviously very obvious the benefits of that, but it's also digital connectivity, and something which I think is increasingly important is social connectivity. I don't want Cambridge to just be somewhere where someone just chooses to live and then they go to work. I want them to have a real sort of understanding of the roots of where they live. Okay, and that's why heritage. That's why, talking about Wisbech having more historic buildings than Stamford, for example, you also sell an area by its history, by its roots, and by the story you can tell. Okay, and that is what I'm going to try and do as mayor. I'm going to try and tell a story about Peterborough, about Huntingdon, about Wisbech, about St Neots, about Cambridge, about all of our great county, so people can feel proud of living there, proud of the opportunities, and we can create a healthier, wealthier, and happier society.
If I may just make one extra reflection on that. Sometimes with rail, we accept the services as they're running now as the kind of status quo. And I've been challenged quite heavily through the Oxford to Cambridge Growth Corridor team in government to say, well, is it right? Is it right? And so I think there is a conversation to be had where we've got a lot of evidence. I'm sure the Combined Authority similarly has a huge amount of evidence. We should put the evidence together, see what we can pull out. And I suspect there might be some things that you can challenge the status quo on, that perhaps we're under the right leadership is, with leadership with us, we can start to really question those things. We have done it in a different part of the geography around Oxford to Swindon, where we spotted a tiny bit of capacity on the network and we jumped in. And actually, that project is really rare for rail. The chances are we're going to see that come forward really quickly, which, when you're dealing with rail, is a miracle. So we're delighted by that, and we'd love to bring that learning to kind of some of the huge opportunities. Like, I imagine the next question, it might just be around UKREiiF East. So I will bring you in. Next question.
Thank you. Jake Nugent, Endurance Estates. It's really interesting to hear about the future plans and the infrastructure, 141, East-West Rail. Big infrastructure projects, funding, delivery takes time. Huntingdon has been mentioned. It is a fundamental linchpin, between Peterborough and Cambridge, as well as the wider region. The government has already spent £1.5 billion worth of public money on the A14, and that has released significant network capacity on what is now the 1307 that runs between Alconbury Weald all the way down to St Ives and further east. In terms of the ability to turn that into a sustainable transport corridor that can move a significant number of people around, that can happen quickly. The ability to deliver growth at pace and have a positive impact on existing communities seems like an opportunity too good to miss. So I'd be interested in the panel's thoughts on ensuring that the existing opportunities, the existing infrastructure, the existing investment is absolutely capitalised on as a phase one, whilst those big projects are getting up and running to deliver that long-term sustainable growth.
Fantastic. Any reflections on that from the panel? I think just while panel members are thinking about it, one reflection from me is actually, if we are trying to secure further funding for other major opportunities in the region from the government, alongside incredible leadership and tight single messaging from a region, is actually about showing the government that where we have had investment, my goodness, we respond well to it. And from East West Rail, that's a large part of the project that we've been working on as EEH, is to say to the government, if you put the money in, we will come to the table and we will do the other bits like integration to make this happen. And so it's a very good point around projects like the A14. I know it's one that Huntingdonshire District Council, for example, are hugely, hugely keen to see happen. But I will hand over to panel members, Andrew, and then any other reflections.
Yeah, just coming in on that principle, obviously that example is within Paul's area, so I'll sort of leave others to comment on that. But in general, the principle is absolutely sound. And it's why in our submission to the Treasury for the spending review, we set out a number of things that could be done in the short term. And within that, there are a number of schemes, particularly for rail, building on Naomi's point, between the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority and the Transport East area that you could get away pretty quickly without the need for new infrastructure. An example of that is increasing frequency on the Peterborough to Ipswich line. You can do that without any new track. And we've seen elsewhere in the region where we've done that, where you increase frequency, the public respond. So the East Suffolk line a while ago increased frequency, it doubled frequency, and there was a 100% increase in patronage as a result of that intervention. No new track needed, just needed to put new trains in terms of the timetable. So you can do these things. Another one we've talked about is increased frequency to Stansted as well, which would support the CPCA area, in lieu of the longer term investment. And what that does is builds the demand then to make the better business case for those longer term investments as well. So short term interventions, I absolutely agree, are really important to lay the groundwork for then the longer term investment needed.
Natalie.
I was going to add to that as well in terms of the East West Rail project. The ability to offer benefits as soon as they're available is absolutely part of the scheme in terms of not waiting till that end result, full A to B service. It's looking at where there are opportunities to deliver early benefits. And that's absolutely, I think, the thinking that we need to be having when we're doing these big complex infrastructure projects. Where are the sort of quick wins and the things that benefit people sooner?
Fantastic, thank you. Can I go to the next question? Yeah, gentleman over there.
Thank you, David Bedell, Octavius Infrastructure. I'm conscious that as a Geordie in a room with Middle England, this one may need subtitles, but we'll give it a go. I've heard a lot the last day and a half around private investment supporting economic regeneration around infrastructure, that term infrastructure. We're talking about transport in this session, and in my experience, transport has traditionally struggled to compete with other sectors within infrastructure, such as healthcare, education, high tech. I just wonder if perhaps Dan and Natalie could expand on their experience of how we as an industry can make linear transport projects a far more attractive investment proposition for the private sector? Is it just a case of marketing and PR, or do we need to better articulate and monetize the economic and social benefits of transport? Those that plan, design and construct transport projects, what is it that we can do when we leave the room?
What a fantastic question. Dan, Natalie, and I don't know whether Paul might want to come in on that as well. Brilliant question. I suspect the answer might be somewhere in the BCR and Treasury Green Book, but let's have much more interesting conversation than that.
Yeah, I think there's a great question. There's kind of a couple of points I'd probably focus on with that. I guess first and foremost, you said it, it's a transport project. Is it really a transport project? It's a regeneration or a development project. A lot of these things aren't. That's what it's about. It's about driving, delivering growth. So we shouldn't just be having a conversation with the Department for Transport. We should be bringing in MHCLG, Homes England, all the other kind of parts of government, and having that kind of big, wider conversation, making sure you can lever all of the little bits of money that might be available to kind of help deliver that project. So that's kind of first point observation. The second thing is in terms of private investment, and kind of maybe what I touched on previously, public transport projects per se, kind of the revenue that you generate from the passenger will generally just cover the operation costs of the service that's kind of provided. If it's a really popular service, it may well generate a surplus that may well then mean that you've got some money to kind of repay that financing. Otherwise, you are looking into the realms of government grant. So that doesn't make getting private finance into the situation comfortable. In the past, private projects have been delivered. So you look at, say, Nottingham Tram as an example. That was privately financed through PFI, which at the moment is kind of persona non grata in Treasury, so it's not going to be something that's going to be used immediately. But what did that project do? You've got a revenue stream that government's provided to help service the investment that's been delivered. You've got the council who's delivered a workplace parking levy that contributes to the operation of it, and you've got the fare box that kind of is used to kind of also kind of cover some of the costs of running that service. So kind of, in order to deliver them, we've got to think quite creatively about the different sources of funding that you can use and how you put them together. But as I say, kind of for the big, larger transport infrastructure projects, they can be, ones where you're going to need some central government support, and you're going to need a strong authority to deliver it, because there's a heck of a lot of planning and other things that we need to get through, and planning is something we haven't talked about. That kind of that process kind of needs to be improved to enable projects to get through quicker. Where the private sector is able to kind of invest and can deliver things, and maybe deliver things kind of better, is there's a transition to diesel fuel to zero emission buses that Andrew talked about. You've got kind of providing the majority of the country's clean energy in the area. Is that something you can harness to help accelerate the decarbonisation of your bus network, which private sector is ready and able to finance, and also should deliver kind of what they call total cost of ownership benefits. So it's going to be cheaper to run those buses over time, even though you've got a higher capital cost than if you were just replacing that electric bus with a diesel.
Fantastic. Steve, if I bring you in, and then I know there's one quick question left, and then I really want to wrap up with a quick reflection from each of the panel members. So Steve, if you could respond.
Yep. I mean, just very briefly, I think actually, we don't talk about it very much, but actually there's private transport markets in the UK where there's enormous amounts of private sector investment going in. So ports, shipping vessels, rolling stock, HGV fleets, HGV charging, etc. So I think, but obviously those ones are the ones where when you click to buy something on Amazon, you don't see the little levy that says this is the amount you're investing in freight infrastructure, for example. So I'd make that point. I think in the past in the UK, we have built bridges and roads and motorways using regulated financing models that allowed lots of private sector investment. And to be honest, since PFI was killed, we haven't really ever replaced it with a model. So I think part of the challenge here is that I think we haven't kind of established what that new model is. Now, whether those are models based around land value capture or doing, business rate devolution, which is kind of how the free ports are funded, I think there are other options out there. But I think probably until we kind of coalesce around what's that model that we want to run with, we're going to struggle to get any private sector investment into the schemes that are then really about almost kind of public transport models, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, can I ask for a statement rather than a question from the gentleman? I know you've been quite keen to raise a question. If you could raise it, but we might not be able to spend too much time answering it. So a statement would be really preferable.
Okay, well, it was a statement, but I'll
Excellent.
return to Paul, really. I'm an engineer turned scientist turned entrepreneur. Now, Peterborough has an economy that's based on engineering that looks north to the Midlands, and Cambridge's economy looks to the Golden Triangle in terms of its prosperity. So how do you you build a transport infrastructure around it, but it needs to have a sectoral foundation to it for the transport to be meaningful. So how do you kind of merge and make sense of those two very different sectors?
I think if we wrap that into the conclusions, my reflection as the subnational transport body that does look across to the Midlands as well is that a lot of the work we've done is on transport needs and interventions are tied to the sectors anyway. So we will be very closely working with Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority on the local growth plan, and we will be in effect responding to what they set out as their aspirations. And our challenge is to say, well, how do we maximise the connectivity for that so that we can look into the Midlands? I'm going to say it, Ely and Hawley Junction is a really, really, really important part of connecting to the Midlands. So if you leave with one thing today, please continue your support for that, because the next 4 or 5 weeks are really critical for that. I'm just going to wrap this session up by asking each of the panel members a final quick reflection, and if I could stress the quick. Transport is incredibly long-term transport infrastructure, but actually, as we've heard quite a lot, the next 5 years is really, really critical for the success of the economy of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, for the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, as is the next 10. So from each of the panel members, could I hear your reflections on, if you're sitting here in 5 years' time talking about what you've achieved over the last 5 years, what do you want that to look like? What do you want to see happen? And if I start, I'm going to start at that end, Dan. If I could start with you and then come back this way, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from our perspective, we'd look to have supported the combined authority in delivering some of the transport investment and infrastructure that they're looking to do, and kind of hopefully worked with a number of businesses delivering projects that focus on the 4 sectors that where the government's asked us to invest into.
So from East West Rail perspective, I'd say what would be great is over the coming years to make sure that we really capitalise on this ambition to have that collaborative working and shared vision, so that when we're delivering infrastructure and transport in particular, we're really focusing on not only the infrastructure that we're delivering at the time, but also how does that integrate with the existing and future transport infrastructure, so that we make sure we're not just looking at the immediacy, but also looking what we can do future-wise as well.
For my hometown of Wisbech, dual the A47 and reconnected to the railway network. I'll say that. I mean, to be honest, in 5 years' time, actually, I kind of hope we have mayors in our region that have been given the tools and the powers to be able to turn around and say, actually, after 5 years, I've delivered quite a lot of transport investment. I mean, I think that would be a great outcome.
I mean, focusing on the outcomes that we set out in our strategy in 5 years' time, economic growth, more social inclusion and driving down carbon emissions. Those are the outcomes we want to see. How will they have been delivered by the things that we've asked Treasury for in the spending review submission this year? And they talk very much around developing the connectivity corridors between Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, Norwich, Suffolk, Ipswich and Essex, specifically East-West Rail, Eastern Section, Ely and Hawley, and through the RIS programme, A47, A11, A14 and A120, but very clear priorities that we've got in our strategy.
And finally, over to the Mayor.
So in my manifesto, I had a series of key things that I wish to achieve. They were bold, they were ambitious, and it was a clear vision. As a combined authority, I want us to see us doing fewer things, but doing them very well. And if in 4 years, come the next time there's an election in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, he said 5, within 4 years, if we can turn a page and have a united vision of those things that we wish to achieve, that everyone agrees are the right things we need to do insofar as we can, even if we only have to unite around some of those things, and we begin delivery, I think that's been a wonderful 4 years.
Well, on that note, I think we are all partners together on this journey, and it's an exciting journey to go on. It leaves me to thank my panel members very much for joining us on what was a really interesting and inspiring panel, to recommend the nightlife of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough to all of you, and to thank Connie and the amazing team at Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority for putting together this pavilion, because it's been a huge amount of work. So thank you all very much.